Okay, so I have here Az, who is a PhD candidate in mycology. And
Hello, hello.
for those who don't know what mycology is, it's basically the study of fungus, which is perhaps one of the more charming topics that one could pick for their PhD. So we're going to actually talk about specifically the contentious fungal growth in Starcraft 2. So I've got a few questions here for Az. Started off with the transmission method. How would it go from the celebrated colon of the infestor to the target?
So that's actually interesting. A lot of fungi that infect insects actually grow out of the head of the insect. So I think the anal sporulation is a little weird. In terms of just shooting out spores, there are a lot of fungi that do that, and some do it quite explosively. So that's possible.
Okay, well that's good. Would once the spore lands, of course, is when the sort of growth happens. I would imagine.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So spores are they're a way of vegetatively propagating the fungus, and although it's fast, it's not on the order of seconds. It takes like a few days. If you think about how fungus grows on, hopefully not your leftovers, but leftovers left in a fridge, I mean, it takes a few days to get fungal growth happening. So, probably not a devastatingly fast mechanism.
is there perhaps a way in which it's primed? So, for example, within the lore of StarCraft 2, you get a lot of the Zerg enhancing genetics and sort of, like, for example, with the Roach, enhancing its abilities to self regenerate. So, is there a potential way in which this fungus has been primed?
I don't know if that's biologically feasible.
Mm.
So fungi do interact with their hosts in a lot of ways, and fungi infecting plants can sometimes reduce their susceptibility to pathogenic infections and things like that. A lot of fungi interacting with plants can actually increase their rate of nutrient absorption, things like that. Um, but generally, most fungi are just weak pathogens. It takes a while for um, host and fungus interactions to get set up. The one really cool fungus is actually the cordyceps fungus, and I alluded to it earlier when I talked about fungi growing out of the head of an organism. The cordyceps fungus actually infects ants, well, actually many insect species, but you've probably seen the ants that have been basically turned into zombies by this fungus. It causes them to exhibit a phototaxic behavior where they actually move towards the light and then they clench onto the tops of grass stems and just stay there. So the infestor kind of causes the infected host to stop moving after a while, and so that's like biologically legitimate.
Okay, well, that actually brings me to an interesting point. The infestor is actually a superorganism that, for those that don't know, that also swallows the marines whole and infests them. So this fungal growth cordyceps style could, in fact, be part of what's happening with the marine himself. So now I wanted to ask about specifically how this cultivation inside of a abdominal cavity might occur, and how quickly it could occur.
Now that's an interesting question. There actually are some fungi in the group Chytridiomycota, so water molds and things that can live inside guts, and in fact they're very common in the guts of cows and other animals that eat grass, and they actually break down the cellulose. But most fungi actually don't live in an abdominal cavity. They can't, unless they're pathogens and absolutely just break down all of the tissue.
Okay, so with the infestor, what it does is it picks up marines injured or perhaps newly dead into its gut on the battlefield and infests them. Now, I imagine if it's unable to infest, say, a newly deceased marine, it may use the biological remains to produce this fungus. That seems
Oh,
feasible.
so like sort of a saprotroph, yeah. That's feasible.
All right, so the next question I have for you is in regards to the damage. How, like, it causes a significant amount of damage over a wide area rather rapidly. How quickly can a fungus cause damage to things like metal or, say, like a strong cuticle of an insect or, anything really?
Fungi are really awesome at biodegradation, but it does take a long time. They can break down rocks and metals, but it's on the order of several months to several years. They do leach up a lot of metals, particularly things like calcium, which they use for their own life processes, but it's not fast. In terms of decaying things, fungi are best at decaying plants. Things like cuticle take longer. Anything that's like high sugar, high liquid, fungi can deal with that very competently and very quickly on the order of a few days to a week. But anything that's more structurally sound, cellulose, cuticle, things like that, it takes a lot longer.
Okay, so it's looking to me like the entire concept of this sort of explosive growth has been sort of
It's been put
debunk.
on fast forward.
Yeah, it's been put on very rapid fast forward, I would say. And the fact that what's strange to me is once it starts the process in the game, it actually ends it just as quickly as it starts it, which is quite the opposite of what happens with a fungus.
Yeah, so fungi, once they've dealt with what they're eating, once there's no more nutrients available, they just go into this resting stage. They produce these resting propagules that just stay there. And then when conditions get good again, these propagules germinate and grow out more little hyphae.
Okay, so can you think of any um, organism that would more aptly describe what we're seeing in the video rather than a fungus?
There could be some really interesting protist parasites that would do something like this, but I don't know. It's like this weird agglomeration between a cool protistan parasite and a fungus. It's kind of it's a little fantastical. You can see where their creative inspiration comes from, but I don't suspect that there's anything actually alive that would behave this destructively this quickly.
See, the idea with the Zerg is that they actually take parts from certain organisms and enhance other ones at times. They manipulate genes very rapidly and things like that. So perhaps there is some element of, say, hijacking of genetics from a protist and using several different fungi to to create what we see.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'll be sure to send you the link of the video.
All right. Thanks, Dave.